Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and this is the summary for the day of 654 for the 9th of December. So there is major developments on multiple fronts. So do wait and go through the different front lines. If not, just jump based on the timestamp. So I'm going to go through some of the major ones first. And first thing first is the ADVANCE front. Over at the ADVANCE front, the Russian forces continue their ADVANCE offensive, but of significance is over on the eastern part of ADVANCE. The Russian forces have made tremendous progress over in this region here. So let me go down a bit. So this is Kayamka, and the Russian forces have pushed from Kayamka down this way. Previously, the front line is actually along the highway. You can see it's actually along this highway region, and even possibly stretch to Krota-Balka or just line up all along the highway. But the Russian forces, in the latest update, according to Ryba, the pro-Russian source, they say that over the past 10 days, so this information has been hidden until today. Over the past 10 days, the Russian forces have been making this push, and all the way they have reached even to this outskirt of this easternmost suburb of ADVANCE, and they have totally penetrated across the entire highway. They have captured this I don't know what is this facility over on this southwest of Krota-Balka, and they have all continued to push in the west of Kashtanove, in the north of this industrial area that we know the famous lone tank raid happens over this area here. So the front line has basically changed a lot. This is now the front line looking like this, and we are going to expect that the Russians continue to straighten the line, putting pressure. I think this is where the Russians is going to go for, capturing the entire area of this forest region here, close up this entire field region here, take over this entire area, and to line up the line along this reservoir region or this lake region, and straighten the line, and then eventually putting even further pressure and to line up against the suburb, where else then they can penetrate into the suburb and then totally put the pressure and the battles straight into the heartlands or the heart of ADVANCE. I believe this is what we are looking at over on the eastern side of ADVANCE, and this side seems to be pretty weak for it to be falling this quickly, as the other fronts, all the other front line is a lot more strong, and it could be a possibility that the Ukrainians have been redeploying forces away from this area here to reinforce the other regions that was under siege, and they are pushing all the way up to this area and leaving this front line here a bit bare, and the Russians pounced on it over the past 10 days. Yeah, and so while this is happening, we also have information coming from the pro-Russian source suggesting that now the Ukrainian strength over at the ADVANCE front is up to 40 battalions strong, up to 8 brigades. So 40 battalions are all 8 brigades. So, and they have been transferred from the western sectors of the front, concentrating in the direction. So they're basically moving a lot of troops into this area here to hold up the front line, and for them, ADVANCE cannot fall. As I mentioned before, ADVANCE really cannot fall. In terms of the I mean, in terms of the strategic sense, ADVANCE, of course, is an important city, but of course, the war, if you look across the wide expanse of how big Ukraine is, this is just one city. However, in terms of the PR sense, this is a city that just cannot fall, because the moment ADVANCE fall, it will just overshadow literally any success that the Ukrainians have over the past almost 1 year in terms of their counteroffensive. So they are doing whatever they can, but the tide of war is going against the Ukrainians as the Russians continue their offensive. There is fighting reported in the eastern part of Novokalinove, in the east of Novobahmutivka, Stepove, south of Stepove towards the coke plant, south of the coke plant, not south of the coke plant, south of the slag heap, which is the what I call the volcano, at Kayamka, over at the west of Krota-Balka or the east of ADVANCE, over in the south, of ADVANCE over at Giverny, Tonenke, as well as Performance. So you can see that the main difference from previously was actually the addition of this part where this frontline is totally activated right now. So this is actually very, very significant in terms of this battle of ADVANCE. So in the southern area here, the Russian forces is fighting around this sand quarry. They are pushing out from this area currently. This comes at the same time where the Russian forces is pushing further up north from this position. There is a geolocation, but I suspect this is actually a much older footage by military summary of Ukrainian forces over at this position. Given the color of the foliage, I feel like this might be a bit older than recent. But it is a Ukrainian position, fortified position getting bombed. And another major area of advancement is probably, around the coke plant or the volcano region. The Russian forces are pushing in this area here. This water filtration plant or water treatment plant actually has been captured for a long time. All this recent information about it getting captured by the Russian forces is actually belated information. If you have followed DPA's coverage, Ryba also mentioned the same thing, that this filtration plant has been captured for some time. So you see, despite the appearance on the web only now of the information of progress of the Dacha cooperative ADVANCE along the treatment facility, this section has been taken for a long time. So this one, as I have mentioned, I have reported this for a long time already. So this is not particularly anything new. So you can see it's probably maybe a month old or either half a month old. So fighting is coming along in this area here. There is no, according to the Russians, they say that they are not storming the coke plant just yet. Currently, they are conducting a weakening operation. They are conducting fire artillery airstrikes to weaken the defensive position of the Ukrainians within the coke plant before they can storm in. The effort currently is happening north of the coke plant as the Russians attack south of Stepove and within Stepove itself. At the Stepove situation is a bit difficult for the Russians as the Ukrainians continue to hold tree lines along this area here, as the Ukrainians have all these tree lines. They are holding all these tree lines as a result, and then also part of Stepove. So as a result, if any Russian push within this region here, they can get attacked from all directions. They can attack from this direction. So, and not to mention the occasional storming of the Ukrainian armored vehicles like the Bradleys or the tanks going in and out of Stepove. So situation over at the Stepove area here is not easy. So unless the Russians have a success in flanking this position, capturing all these tree lines, then they can actually develop this entire area to go towards Betaichi. Tentatively, this front line here is extremely difficult for the Russians. The Russians continue their push over on the eastern part of Novokalinove, as well as in the eastern part of Novobakhmutivka, heading towards Ocheretiny. So the Ukrainian forces continue to hold positions and entrenching themselves over at Ocheretiny to anticipate this eventual arrival of the Russians. So over at the Tonenke Giverny region, there is not much update in terms of where the front line have changes. I don't think there's any changes around this front line, whereas the Russians did indeed continue to push over at Giverny and Tonenke. If you are wondering, if you are new to this channel, you're wondering where is this information coming from, everything is sourced. So fighting near Tonenke is by Ukrainian Defense Ministry. Giverny is actually reported by Ryba, the pro-Russian source. And so the situation at Performance remains the same. We do not know what's happening. The Russians are actually attacking around the Performance region. Previously, we have a geolocation of Ukrainian forces in the middle of Performance. So the Russians definitely have not progressed quite far. But it's actually not important for them to take Performance. And as long as the Russians continue to put pressure on the east, straighten up the line, making it become a banana, and once it becomes a banana, then you can actually eat it. So then you can close your mouth and then you chew, and you chew and grind all the food, and then you swallow and bring all the POW back into Donetsk. So this is the ADVANCE front. Another major front line with a lot of changes is actually at the Siversk front. Over at the Siversk front, previously we mentioned about the Siversk offensive, which we have very limited information about. There's not a lot of report about Siversk offensive. We only caught it because the Ukrainian Defense Ministry reported widespread attack across the entire front line by the Russian forces. And finally, we actually have updates coming from the Rybar. So Rybar showed in their mapping that the Russian lines actually have progressed much further than I imagined. The front line is now along Rozhdolivka and Vasily. There's a progress in the northern part of Bilohorivka, which means that the progress looks a lot like this. This is actually a lot of movement. So if I overlay this with the previous day's mapping, you'll be able to see how much the Russians have pushed. Particularly, you can see that the previous line was actually around here. This was the previous line, and then the Russian forces over the past X number of days, we do not know how many days actually this had happened. We can do an estimate. The last report was 5th to 6th December. This is probably which means around the past 1 week, the Russian forces actually have been pushing in this direction, and they finally actually managed to arrive at Vasily again. This is not the first time the Russians have reached Vasily. They have ever reached Vasily long time ago during the Wagner era, around almost 1 year ago. This time round, the Russian forces have basically caught up with whatever the Wagner forces have achieved. And then I believe that we're going to see a lot more information coming out from this front line over the next few days. Particularly for Vasily, according to Rybar, they say that Vasily is probably, so they are not very sure. They say that there's a probability that the village is now currently in a semicircle. That means the Russian forces currently is almost encircling, wrong color. The Russian forces is currently pushing, because this front line is already in this area here. The Russians have been attacking in this area. So there is a possibility that the Russians have already, moved into this direction, and they are continuing to make this push, and it could become a pincer, and they will cut off any withdrawal route by the Ukrainians. And this actually is also not a particularly, very transportable, not transport friendly location. So if you look at the road system around this area here, there is just dirt roads. It's just full of dirt roads. There's not there's no proper roads around here. The proper roads actually lead down to Soleda. So through Yakovlevka, then to Soleda is actually going south. There's no proper roads moving around this area here. So they would have to traverse through a lot of snow and mud, and depends. If there's snow, then maybe not that much mud. But what do I know? I live in Singapore. I know Singapore don't have snow, so I do not know what is it going to be like, in the Slavic regions. So, so other than that, we have reports of this fighting also acknowledged by Deep State UA. The mapping actually is also based on, the mapping is actually based on Deep State UA. It's Ukrainian mapping, but then it was acknowledged by Rybar. So as you can see, all the attribution is to Deep State UA. I made a mistake, sorry. It's Deep State UA, pro-Ukrainian source mapping. So to update that this progress have happened. So so since we are here, we go into the Bakhmut front. At the Bakhmut front, there is fighting reported. The Ukrainians actually launched somewhat of a major counter-offensive operation in the Bakhmut front, to like a coordinated, one-time push. I'm not sure whether they can sustain this counter-offensive, but it feels like, this is like a let's do it one more time, and then they punch the Russians as hard as they can. There's fighting reported at Vasyukivka, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, and then further south, we actually have reports of Ukrainians attacking at Bodanivka, while the Russians are also attacking at Bodanivka. There's counter-attack reported at Ivanivsky. The Russians are also attacking Ivanivsky. So all these reports coming from the Russian Defense Ministry. Ukrainians are the ones that are talking about the Russian attack over this region here. There is multiple geolocations by Creamy Caprice and Military Summary that helps us define the front line a little bit with Ukrainians over at this position. This does not change our front line very much, but there is geolocation of Ukrainian forces within the fortress. The Trial Fortress region here, the Ukrainian forces got attacked by FPV drones over at this position. FPV drone. So which also the drones also does shows that the Russian forces is actively trying to overtake this position. So we will continue to monitor and see how this goes. So for ADVANCE, the Russian Defense Ministry reported that they repelled an attack at Krasnoye, which is ADVANCE. So I'm not sure exactly where the attack come from. Is it in the northern sector, or is it in the eastern sector of ADVANCE? So we shall continue to wait and see if we can get any more information from the OSIN. Over in the southern flank of Bakhmut, we have fighting reported in this area. As you can see, there is three Ukrainian icons. So these attacks come very rarely in this area here. As you can see, the previous Ukrainian attack at ADVANCE was on the 17th of November. So the Kodyomivka is the same. The previous was on the 21st. So the Ukrainians have been on the back foot for a long time, and they launched a major counteroffensive around this area here. But however, it seems like the Russians still have the initiative with the fighting over in the northern part of Klishchiivka, at Klishchiivka, ADVANCE, and Kodyomivka. So there is a massive clash in terms of the forces in this area here. The Ukrainians counterattack doesn't mean that the Russians stop attacking. So let's see how this goes. Whether the Ukrainians can sustain their offensive, their counteroffensive. My gut feeling is they can't, because my feeling now is that the Ukrainians are really struggling. Over at the New York front, there is geolocation of Ukrainian forces just off Mayorsk, in the area near Druzhba. So with this geolocation at this location, we can confirm that the Ukrainians are still definitely around the area here, that the Russians did not fight anywhere near to Pivnishny nor Druzhba. So if there is the reports of this fighting around here, like what we reported yesterday, maybe this fighting here is more of artillery or positional or drone type of attack. The Russian Defense Ministry reported the Ukrainians attack at Sumy. This is also part of what I mentioned as this counteroffensive by the Ukrainians in this area here. So let's see how this goes. Whether this can actually lead to anything, I'm not so sure. So this is where the Ukrainian forces counterattack. They also counterattack at Bilohorivka over this region here, just now in the Siversk front. I forgot to mention. But as you can see, most of the front line is actually in the Russians' advantage, so it doesn't really matter too much. We move on over in the southern front over at Kherson. We do not have any reports of fighting around Krinky region. The Ukrainian forces are still at Krinky, in case you are wondering, but suddenly there's no fighting around here. I think the Russians are giving them a break. I do not know. So and moving on, there is a geolocation of Ukrainian forces getting bombarded by a air to surface guided missile over at Vimka, but no, not very significant. And we move on into Zaporizhia. What is this? Stenokhurst accidentally moved there. So over the Zaporizhia front, there is geolocation of bombardment over at Stepnokhurst. This is actually reported as units supported by aviation and artillery attacking Ukrainian forces. So close to Stepnokhurst, so it's not exactly fighting because this is a bit far from the front line. However, we do have fighting reported at Pyatikaki with the Russians attacking. Mainly it's a fire mission, so I don't think this is an assault. And over at the Orikhiv sector, this is Orikhiv city. At the Orikhiv sector, the Ukrainian forces also launched the counterattack in coordination with the fighting over at the Bakhmut front, with fighting reported at Robotyne and Verbove. However, this one went pretty badly. According to the pro-Russian sources, the counterattack failed, and then immediately the Russians launched a counterattack. Sorry, the arrow is accidentally this big. I'm not pro-Russian. So yeah, okay, let's redraw. If not, people write in the comments, yeah, you're so pro-Russian, you see the arrow is bigger. The Ukrainians counterattack and the Ukrainians attack, then the Russians counterattack after the Ukrainian attack failed. So and then there was also reported of attack in the area of Novoprokopivka. So, and then of significance in this front line is the Russians have recaptured the entrenchment position around south of Robotyne. So there is major entrenchment that was built by the Russians south of Robotyne. The Russian forces have overtook this area here, and they have recaptured the position. So there is geolocation of Ukrainian forces launching a counterattack that failed around in this north of this entrenchment region. So this could be that failed counteroffensive that was mentioned. Not sure, maybe. So, but the failure of Ukrainians to keep this entrenchment is terrible, because this would mean that the Ukrainian forces over at Robotyne have lost the entire southern flank, and which means that the next defensive position is just within Robotyne itself. They still hold these two trench lines, but they do not really have much of a presence along this tree line. This tree line is pretty much a gray zone as far as I can tell, as the Ukrainian forces launch a armored attack in this area here and then got wiped out. So the Russians is likely to continue their offensive, recapture this trench line, and then the Russians will continue to push from the direction of Novoprokopivka towards Robotyne, and then complete the strangling of Robotyne. And then if the Russians able to reach to this point, the Ukrainian forces will have no options but to actually, withdraw out of Robotyne to something more defensible, because Robotyne itself is not a very defendable place right now. They will have to go back to certain other entrenchment along the tree lines and whatnot, and this would also signify another massive failure by the Ukrainian forces, that to lose the first town that they have the first major town that they have captured in their counteroffensive, one of the major ones. So over at the Odekhiv sector, of course, they actually have captured a lot more over at this Velika Novosilka sector. At the Velika Novosilka sector, the Ukrainian forces actually captured a number of settlements around here, from the gray city, a gray village of Vremivka, to Neshkushne, Starozheve, and then Makarivka, Staromayovsky, and Uruzhaine. So there is a chain of settlement, as well as Rivnopil, Novodarivka, Novopil, and yeah. So these are the major ones, and Levadne and Okhivske. So these are the major ones that the Ukrainians have captured. But all these settlements, is still pretty much in the non-defensive zones. It's not the major defensive areas of the Russians, whereas Robotyne itself is very special. It's part of the first line of defense. So that's a major settlement for the Ukrainians to have captured. Over in this area here, the Russian forces launched an attack over in the Staromayovsky region, according to a Ukrainian Defense Ministry. I forgot to paste in the link. So this in their evening report. There is geolocation of Ukrainian forces north of Prione, according to military summary. So basically, just some frontline actions, which actually corroborates the front line. So that's all from the Velika Novosilka sector and the entire of the Zaporizhia front. We move into the Donetsk front. At the Donetsk front, the Ukrainian forces in their counteroffensive also attacked Novodonetsk. So whilst the Russians continue their effort over at Marinka, at Boyeda, as well as Novomikhailivka. So you can see this number of attacks launched by the Ukrainians, as per reported by the Russian Defense Ministry, seems to be really a lot. So which is why it caught my attention that it should be some kind of coordinated operation. Whether it is sustainable is another question altogether. But it's definitely impressive that they are still able to garner enough forces to launch counter-offensive. Yeah, so moving on, we have covered all this front line, as well as ADVANCE, New York, Bakhmut, Siversk. We go into the Crimea front. At the Crimea front, there is no more reports of fighting around the Terny Yampolivka region, Nortovsky, and Dibrova. The fighting currently is around in the Serebransky forestry, with the Russians claiming that they are attacking and defending at the same time. So there is geolocation by military summary showing the Ukrainian forces just off the road over here, forcing us to change the front line. So now the new front line is around here, because previously the Ukrainians was not known to have captured this position. So the geolocation have changed the front line again. So otherwise it is just the Russians claiming that they are attacking and defending at the same time. So we shall see how this goes. We're not sure what is exactly happening around here. We move on over from the Crimea front. Over the Svetove front, there is fighting reported at Novoselivsky. The Russian Defense Ministry claimed that the Ukrainians attacked at Novoselivsky along with Sinkovka, and Ukrainian Defense Ministry claimed that it's the Russians that is attacking. So there is this clash of opinions, contradicting information. So we shall see how this goes, whether who is the one that is attacking who. Over at the Kupiansk front, this is a Kupiansk city. At the Kupiansk front, as usual, the Ukrainian forces attacking at Sinkivka, whereas the Russians concentrating their effort at Sinkivka. And something special is that the Russians mentioned Petropavlivka. They are attacking Petropavlivka. And they also mentioned Kurilivka. Kurilivka is a bit far, so this is probably just bombardments, airstrikes, or artillery strikes. And this is all from the Kupiansk front. It's getting quieter and quieter. There's no actions being reported at the ADVANCE region. And that's it. I think this is it. This is the summary for the day of 654 for the 9th of December. Enjoy your Sunday. My Sunday is going to be over very, very soon. But thank you for watching. Do press the like button. Subscribe to the channel. If you are not subscribed, if you are subscribed, do check below and make sure that you are actually subscribed, because sometimes you will be unsubscribed unintentionally by someone or something goes. And also, you know, yeah, and comment below to let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next update.